Welcome back to the Bear Talk Podcast. We are back with another episode of Let's Talk About It. And today we're going to be continuing our series of doing a deep dive into every single NBA team before this upcoming season. This episode we're going to be focusing on the Memphis Grizzlies, a team who had, I feel like, a blessing in disguise kind of year last year for the Memphis Grizzlies, dealing with every single injury in the book. I think everybody on their roster was hurt at one point. And looking at this, I think it's going to be a great bounce back year for the Memphis Grizzlies. I kind of want to compare this to maybe not them being a championship winning team next year, but kind of looking at it in the lens of when the Golden State Warriors had all those injuries and kind of had a blessing in disguise year in 2021 to gear them up to have a bounce back season and go on a deep playoff run in 2022 and eventually win the championship. Not saying I kind of had the same expectations for this Memphis Grizzlies team, but I feel like this is a team, when healthy, is the top team in the Western Conference. Like, people are quick to forget about how good Ja Morant is. Ja Morant's the top 5 point guard in the game. I feel like people are really quick-minded to forget how good Ja Morant is, how good Desmond Bane is, how good Triple J is. Triple J is Defensive Player of the Year a couple years ago. So looking at this team, they have a ton of young talent. They are having a really blessing in disguise year, being bad last year. In terms of the offseason moves, they didn't really do a whole lot because they kind of did all their movement the offseason prior, going into last season, had all the injuries happen, and I feel like they're in a very interesting spot where now they know a lot more about their roster as a whole to really be able to go into this season with a fresh mind. I feel like we saw a lot from Vince Williams, who can be a key rotational piece for this team, because I feel like they're lacking at that small forward spot still, and I feel like you saw maybe enough from Vince Williams to be like, okay, I really like what we see. I like his fit next to a Ja Morant and a Desmond Bane, because he does, even though he's like 6'4", 6'5", I feel like he has like he plays bigger than his size, and him at the 3 is kind of a lot better than maybe like a Desmond Bane, who is a lot smaller than a Vince Williams. You saw a lot from Gigi Jackson, who is super young, who I feel like can be like a Swiss Army knife kind of guy for you, that depending on his development can give you a lot and be a really nice pairing with what they have in their big 3. Looking at this starting lineup going into next year, you have Ja Morant, Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane. I feel like it's still going to be at year 3. I think Marcus Smart is going to be interesting. Let me know kind of what you would do with Marcus Smart, if you would bring him off the bench more so, because they don't really have any like bench point guard depth, unless it's going to be like a Scottie Pippen Jr. stepping up, because he's had some sparks and shown some flashes throughout like the summer league and even the back part of last year, when you got to see a little bit more of these younger guys that are kind of like in that kind of G League rotation, but also kind of in the starting realm, and they kind of got a lot of run on the main roster last year for the NBA. So looking at that, let me know what you would do in terms of Marcus Smart. I'm going to think that he's going to start next to Ja Morant, Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane. I have Salty Aldama at year 4, because I feel like he provides you with a stretch floor ability and the level of spacing this team needs around a Ja Morant. And I still have Triple J at year 5. I feel like they're in an interesting spot because they did draft Zach Edey. Donovan Clingan was not on the board, who was somebody who I thought they were going to mock a ton. There was a lot of buzz in the draft about them trading up to get Donovan Clingan. So they don't get him. They take Zach Edey, which was a very big shock on draft night. I'm not going to be one of these people that was going to turn off my mindset and say Zach Edey's just going to be a bad player because of people hating on him in college. That's a bad narrative, because he was so dominant in college, in the college game. People are just automatically going to assume he's going to be a bust in the NBA because of his size, because of the narrative around him. I have all confidence in the world that Zach Edey could be like very solid for this Memphis Grizzlies team. He's somebody that can play next to Triple J, because Triple J has the ability to space the floor. He's playing with a point guard in Ja Morant, who's going to be able to find him and get him easy looks. My mindset of this is like, looking at Zach Edey's fit with this Memphis Grizzlies team, it's very interesting because he's going to be almost an afterthought on the offensive side of the ball with the Desmond Bane, Ja Morant, and Triple J, to where it's going to be like, there's going to be a lot of instances where Ja Morant is just going to be able to find Zach Edey posting up down low, where he's going to find Zach Edey in a mismatch situation, which is going to be against a lot of people in the league. And Zach Edey is somebody that has good touch around the rim, that has the ability to post. I'm not saying you're running your offense through Zach Edey, but I'm saying in certain stretches, in certain cases, you can really find Zach Edey's play very valuable in certain minutes and stretches throughout games. I think Zach Edey can give you anywhere between 12 to 18, maybe even 20 minutes a night, depending on the matchup, playing next to a Triple J, who in playing next to a Triple J who was a defensive player of the year. Same with Marcus Smart, who's a defensive player of the year. They are going to try to get the most defensively out of Zach Edey and his size. And I feel like Taylor Jenkins is just a phenomenal coach. And I feel like he's going to be really able to unlock and develop ways that they can best utilize Zach Edey. They dropped a lottery pick on him, so I do anticipate them finding a way to use him. I think it's going to be very interesting to see if they find a way for him to start, because I do like Triple J at the small ball 5 at times. I feel like he struggles as a rebounder, and him being your main 5, I feel like rebounding-wise can make a struggle for the Memphis Grizzlies in closing out possessions. And I feel like him at the 4 with that switchability he does have, and the shooting ability he does have to also space the floor at the 4, I feel like him at the 4 and Zach Edey at the 5 could be a very interesting lineup to see them use, because I feel like Zach Edey can easily be a nice little double-double guy off the bench, even in some cases playing with this Memphis Grizzlies team. His ability to rebound the ball and play off of a John Morant, I think it's going to be a seamless fit. I kind of like it more and more the more I think about it with the fit with the Memphis Grizzlies, because they could use a little bit more of an offensive kind of punch at certain times, because like if you're not getting the best offensive game from Desmond Bane, it's really just the jaw show, and even Jaren Jackson Jr. has been inconsistent offensively at times. So like they could use somebody off that bench that can kind of just give them a nice little 10 and 8 any given night depending on the matchup. And I feel like Zach Edey is going to be a really, really good fit with this Memphis Grizzlies team. So looking at that, I love that offseason draft move from them. The more I think about it, the more I talk about it, because they could have won another guard. Like during that draft process, like I'm trying to think of who would have been there for them at 9. Because like Montez Buzelis, and I feel like he's more of a project play compared to a Zach Edey, which I feel like is ready now, and I feel like his best use is going to be now. Compared to a lot of the guys that went after him, you could have went like a Jared McCain. I see that, but you already kind of have Desmond Bane, who's a smaller guard. So I kind of am talking myself and liking the pick of Zach Edey more and more. So looking at that, I think it's going to be a really, really good fit. And I think people are kind of hating on the fact that Zach Edey, because of the narratives in college, and I just think that's just a dumb conversation to have. But in terms of the X factor for the Memphis Grizzlies, I think it's going to be Marcus Smart. He was kind of the X factor they brought in for this team last year. He's a veteran presence, a veteran guard. He's going to, I feel like, have an interesting fit. I'm interested to see how it plays out with him, John, Desmond Bane kind of being that 3-guard rotation, but also being in the same starting lineup. I feel like one of them is going to have to move to the bench, and I feel like obviously it's going to have to be Marcus Smart. And I feel like that's when you kind of get the best out of Marcus Smart, is has kind of that bench role. Obviously, he's still going to be closing out games and stuff like that, but I feel like in terms of like maybe you want to slide a Vince Williams or a G.G. Jackson in there to start with more size and length, and then you have Marcus Smart, steady ball handling guard off your bench that can kind of run that second unit and run the show from there. It's going to be interesting to see, but I think Marcus Smart kind of just brings this team a more mature identity, which is something I feel like this team has been lacking past couple of seasons, not really including last year, but I think he's going to be that vocal leader that his team doesn't really have. I feel like Marcus Smart is just going to be able to have just kind of a veteran presence, but also be able to perform at a high level. Like now this team has 2 Defensive Player of the Year winners in the past couple of seasons. So looking at this, I feel like this Memphis Grizzlies team is destined for a bounce back year. And I feel like the addition of just a Zach Edey off that bench, and depending on what they want to do with him in general, you're getting Brandon Clark back healthy. You have Luke Kennard, which you brought back. You have G.G. Jackson, who's young. Vince Williams, who I feel like is going to be turning into a key rotational piece for this Memphis Grizzlies team. In terms of the expectations, prime bounce back spot. I would not be shocked whatsoever to see this Memphis Grizzlies team has a top 5 team in the Western Conference next year. I feel like they're going to have some growing pains for sure that they didn't really have last year, but I feel like people are quick to forget, and I feel like John Morant and this Memphis Grizzlies team is going to be hungry to get back in to the playoff mix and the playoff hunt. So I feel like this team is going to be a bona fide playoff team next year. And the main question I have for this team is, can they stay healthy? That was the main problem with them last year. We know John Morant has had some injury problems in the past. Same with Desmond Bane to a certain extent. Can this team stay healthy enough to make that kind of deep playoff run that I know this team can make? And I feel like this team is going to come into the season hungry and motivated to let the world know that this is a Memphis Grizzlies team that was a top 3 team out west when they were all healthy. And now I feel like they kind of have a more balanced, better unit, and they know a little bit more about themselves to make a deep playoff run again. So that is really all I have for the Memphis Grizzlies. Blessing in disguise kind of year. But thank you guys for tuning into the Barrel Talk podcast. Hope you see you tune in to future episodes.